Greetings, fuckers. I'm gonna invite you into my dirty ass home to just keep lowering the obstacles between me and making video podcasts. This is it. There's little Marcus Barcus over there, in case you've wondered. So, at the beginning of 2025, I came in here and I somewhat confidently proclaimed, this year, I'll be releasing a new episode type. We'll be getting further away from just doing research and informational releases. We're going to start getting personal again. And these are all of the things that we will be talking about. I'm calling this episode type Mervin Along, and it's the new evolution of this project. And then guess what? None of that happened. Best of intentions, no practical measures in reality to actually support that goal. Which, look, do I feel good about it? No, of course not. I'm not easy on myself. And also, I have been living the same 2025 as at least 50% of the population has been. So this is to say, it's been a difficult year. My lack of follow through is not due to lack of desire. It is due to working 3 to 5 jobs at all times, not having working internet, generally having to support myself through societal trauma continually and everything, whatever, all the personal shit that we don't need to get into. Point is, it's been a year of survival, not surthrival, or whatever the internet is probably punnily coming up with these days. And that included me, yours truly, your Jess over here. So this is all to say, I still want to do what I set out to do this year. And we can at least wrap up 2025 with one of these episodes that I promised, and then see what happens in 2026. I am doing things in my life differently. I am obviously setting out trying to podcast differently, and I'm hoping that something good can come from all of these trials. We'll find out. So, I got my multiple beverages. I do mostly run on liquids for the first half of the day. I'm set. And we're going to try to do this video podcasting thing as we talk about what happened in 2025 through the lens of the Mervin Along framework that I proposed at the beginning of this year. Let's dive in. Let's give it a try. So I feel like the most important thing to start with to kind of set the scene. Oh, you can see when I'm looking at my Word document. Look at that. Um, is to begin talking about alt survivalists, one of the groups that I proposed starting at the beginning of this year, because it is really the way that I run my lifestyle. Bit of background on me. I'm an old punker, bit of a capitalism defector as much as possible. And part of that has included camp hosting. Around 2022, I decided rent prices were absolutely not something that I could justify spending in my life. And instead, I started looking for an alternative so that I could, in some ways, not have to be a part of the 9 to 5 rat race that I believe forces people into traumatized ways of existing, survivalist lifestyles. So instead, I bought an RV and got into camp hosting, which is when you trade some physical labor each week for rent in your RV. So I don't pay for a place to park. I don't pay for electrical or water. Instead, I do some kind of menial labor each day. And that takes, a fair amount of pressure off of existing. Or theoretically, it does, at least. It could be worse. Now, all of this means that I tend to live out in the middle of nowhere by design. Cities, I find, are too much human energy for me. They kind of like buzz in a way that sets my system off, where I don't feel like I'm fully in control of my own inner vibe and willpower. So I am also a big fan of nature. I'm always out hiking as much as possible. Things like this, where I decided, fuck it, I'll just live out in beautiful places, kind of far away from humanity. And this is how I get by. It's cool. It allows me to travel without costing a lot of money, and it allows you to live without having to sign a lease or any kind of definitive contract. You know, if a place isn't working out, you just pack up and you go to the next place, which is another thing that helps a traumatized mind like mine. I don't like to feel like I'm getting stuck or trapped somewhere. And I pretty easily do feel that way. So enjoy camp hosting. It does come with some alt survival challenges, though, as you might kind of guess. Living out in the middle of nowhere, there's issues. There's snakes. There are bears. There are wild pigs. There are wildfires. There are creepy campers that you wish you weren't living next to. Um, just on a pure communication basis, I don't really get a cell signal anywhere I've been living. So you do feel a little disconnected from help or assistance, as if coming from, a CPTSD setup, as if you need any help with that. There are times that it can be rough. It can be challenging, especially moving from place to place and having to kind of figure out a new region all the time and search for a new method of socializing. So in some ways, it does feel a little hard shippy. And also, there are ways that sit better in my system than the hardships of sitting in traffic or competing with a bunch of humans to get into a particular restaurant or to get groceries. Um, I'm just not a real big fan of being in the human world as far as running my brain well goes. So it is what it is. It is how I get by. This is the inside of my RV. It's pretty fucking nice. I've done a lot of work in it. And it's something that I would recommend if you have the capacity to kind of be somewhat off grid and avoid the rent disaster that has been our lives since 2020. All of this being said, theoretically, it's been meant to help me take pressure off of my brain, but realistically, 2025 has still been 2025 for the vast majority of us. So this year, I didn't get to do too much relaxing in nature or enjoyment of the places I've been living, as much as I was trapped in a workaholic hole. Workaholics, Anon. This is the next topic for our episode. So one of my major issues is reasonable expectations for myself and breaking the pattern of automaticity, of waking up and immediately jumping into work. Am I doing the best job today? No, it's 9 in the morning and I'm already doing this. It's not a great start. But my point is there are connections between accomplishment, working, and trauma. And when it's a very pro-inflation year, as it has been, it can get challenging. So this year, I found myself falling back into workaholic patterns. Like I said, I've had 3 to 5 jobs at pretty much every point this calendar year. And I ran myself ragged, to be honest. I fell into all of the patterns that I know are the complete antithesis of mental or physical health or wellness for me. Really went back into all of my trauma survival patterns of just, if I work all the time, I'll stay safe. If I'm always busy, I'll be doing the right thing. Um, the sense of scarcity certainly inspired me to continually put myself last and to always be on the go. So I had my camp hosting gig. I was at a park that normally has 4 camp hosts, and it was just me. Story of my life should be a 4 or 5-person team. It was just me. So I was handling way too much just for them, and that was baseline. That was just rent. Going above and beyond doesn't earn you extra money. It just is getting fucked. That was job number one. Then obviously there was podcasting, which had to really get shrunken down also for lack of having any internet like whatsoever. At the same time, I started cleaning houses a few days a week for extra cash monies. I also was pouring beer at a local tap room some nights. And I was getting my course ready for the fall because why not? We needed to transfer from one learning management system platform to another, which meant correct all of the content that didn't transfer over correctly and go looking for all the fucking bugs with it. And then obviously teaching the course, and it's just been an ongoing rolling too many obligations kind of year, trying to have any sort of financial security in the face of inflation, student loans kicking back in, all of those things. So I'll be honest, I really didn't work well for myself. I didn't run my life the way that I needed to this year. I got kicked around and kicked in the teeth a lot by having too many jobs, being trapped in kind of a go, go, go mode that really encouraged me to prioritize all of those jobs rather than ever slowing the fuck down and taking care of myself. An ongoing issue. Which is to say, in a way, that I loved having 8 million jobs because it meant that I always felt like I was doing the right thing. And in a way, it sort of helped me feel safer to constantly be goddamn busy. The paradox of survival mechanisms and a deeply traumatized brain, huh? It obviously comes with a lot of complications, like my brain suffering and also my body, which brings us to bodily mystery theater, our next topic. So I have what I call a challenging physiology. It's pretty much never happy. If I'm not tending to my body, it is breaking in some way. It is not like a set it and forget it kind of system, which, trust me, is the bane of my existence because I am so mentally busy that it is very difficult for me to be physically connected and paying attention. I'd much rather be able to just wake up and work, barely feed myself, not think about my body, and keep going. But alas, not the case. Unfortunately, that is what I largely tried to do this year with all of my working. And I also have to say that from past years of doing this, I had already truly fucked myself. In earlier years of this project and teaching, I was putting in 12 to 14 hours a day on a computer every day and rarely ever having a real like desk or chair set up to work in. It was a lot of sitting on a stool, sitting on the floor, sitting at a picnic bench when I was living outside in a tent, sitting in my car, like just always hunched over on a little laptop, doing my best, pushing out work for years. And it broke my body. Unfortunate fact, your shoulders and lower back cannot take it forever. So, on top of some other things I've had going on, really, I got to the point of my system essentially being crippled and also being unable to tolerate computer work. Another reason why episodes this year got very short and our communications got rather limited. We're literal physical limitations to how much time I can be on a computer before everything starts breaking. So this had gotten so extreme that I was pretty much unable to stand at this time last year. Like I could weirdly kind of lean and prop myself up in ways, but if you asked me to just stand squarely, my body literally couldn't physically do that. It's always like twisting and turning and off kilter and hurting while doing that. And if a person walked up and just like nudged me while trying to stand, I would topple over. Like I had no balance, no strength. Walking was becoming nearly impossible. I was in physical pain with every single step I took. A computer was just excruciating to sit and stare at. And these were characteristics that developed rather slowly over a short number of years, but gradually enough that you don't really realize it. You can keep kind of ignoring what's happening until eventually you're nearly crippled. You're not even 35 years old yet, and you realize you need to make some big changes. So that was a lot of 2025 for me. Just finally trying to actually take care of my physical body because it was getting to the point where I was going to need to be on disability soon. Can't work on a computer. I can't physically move. What am I going to do? Within all of these challenges, needing to work all the time, being pretty close to being crippled, um, I also started having more challenges with my physical health as far as managing it. For years, I've relied on walking a lot, on hiking, on trail running, on lifting weights, on just being very physically active all the time to sort of manage my health and my mental health. And when this tool started being taken away from me, guess what I turned to instead? If you know me, you know the answer is snacking to try to fill the void and have some sort of coping or management tool, which also goes hand in hand with loneliness. We'll get there. But whenever I start eating too much, my body is inevitably unhappy because it can barely digest any foods whatsoever. So on come all of the other like weird systemic ailments when my body is just overloaded or somehow out of balance. And all of the working continually ran my system into the ground. So therefore, another source of illness sprang forward, which is all to say, it was a year of kind of recurring ailments that were difficult to take care of. I guess that's the long story short. This year, both my lifestyle and functioning were chaotic. They have just been a lot of flailing and trying to piece things together. And it's no real big mystery why all of that was happening. Again, considering the societal framework around us, and also the deep emotional turmoil inside that only I got to be surrounded by. Um, if you're not familiar, this past year has also included quite a bit of narcissism recovery for me, as in exiting a family system that is deeply, deeply defined by covert narcissism, per the women who have come before me. So I put in my time. I really attempted to fix things with my family unit. And this past year, I gave up and left all of that behind, including a little no contact request, which is great. And also, it's once you leave that your mind starts really working through a lot of the emotions and experiences that you've had. So, although I now had distance from the abuse, it was really sort of the time that I started processing any of the abuse for the first time. And I'll be honest, it was kind of a deep, heavy, stormy time dealing with an interjected perpetrator. You know, getting the voice of the narcissist out of your mind is no easy task. And a lot of this year was spent trying to stop beating the shit out of myself in the voice of my mother, which also did not help with the workaholism issue. Because if you're not always active, you're doing something wrong in the household that I came from. The bigger story here is that in leaving behind that narcissistic system, I also was leaving behind a lot of filial obligation trends. That's what had kind of pulled me back into the system in the first place. First, there was needing to help my brothers with our father passing and all of the mechanics and legal issues with that, rehabilitating a decrepit house and whatnot. Then my mother lured me back into the family system with stories about my grandmother being sick and ailing. None of that was true. And it was kind of these calls back home, these calls to action that kickstarted a lot of my mental problems. I had been kind of out of the family system, past it, ready to move on from it, and then kept getting pulled back in and back into that covert nonsense. So this past year has also been a lot of fighting with myself about letting go of this sense of over responsibility for everyone, but largely starting with my family. That's where the behavior was trained in me in the first place. If someone has a problem, I need to be there, at least being sad and depressed and accepting all of their negative emotions with them. I'm supposed to be like an emotional receptacle for everyone in my family and to suffer with them. So I finally broke away from that this year, and it has come with a lot of mixed feelings. Like knowing that I, going no contact, am causing them negative emotions is a bit of a clusterfuck because then I feel like I should also be supporting them through that pain that I feel like I am causing. But at a certain point, you can't. I've put in a lot of effort with these folks and have seen that it just doesn't make any difference in outcome. I will still always be the selfish asshole, and it doesn't really matter so much what I actually do versus the stories that they tell. But it still was a heavy year of dealing with that, of fully giving up and realizing that even if I serve them, it still won't be enough. Even if I give up my whole life and move up there for I don't know, fourth or fifth time to try to help them, it won't be appreciated. They will actually end up disliking me more depending on the amount of effort that I put in. So I stopped trying so much this year. And it's been interesting. It's challenged a lot of my instincts that say the only way to stay safe is to always be a little helper to everybody and to make sure that they are okay. But you know what? Nothing I do makes them okay. So this has been a year of trying to recover from that fallacy in thinking. And to refer to a topic that we haven't spoken on in quite a while, it's been very challenging to my parts. Interacting with my family brought out my weakest, youngest, most vulnerable parts, all of my childhood pieces, and all of my old thoughts about not being worthy enough and something innately being wrong with me. This deep, wounded sense of loneliness and incapacity, and just sort of being like a unwanted burden that needs to always be proving my worth. But also, like I said, in trying to prove my worth, it just gets on everyone's nerves and further solidifies what a burden I am. So this real cycling mentality of just not being able to do anything, like I just can't win. And there's just something inherently incorrect about me that makes it so. These are the parts that I've been operating out of since about mid 2022 when I was helping with flipping the dead dad house, but none of my efforts paid off. They just made my brothers more upset. It was very reminiscent of childhood, especially since we were in our childhood home, and it brought up all of the wounds and the unhealed kiddo parts in me. And that's really what I was trying to operate out of all year, while also trying to fit into new social systems, uh, needing to make friends and community. It's not great when your mind is assessing you as being a worthless, sniveling little loser that everyone wishes would go away. And that is really how I was feeling and thinking and behaving. That's where all of the facades of conformity, depression management, rejection, sensitive dysphoria episodes came from this year. I was in such a reduced, sensitive, socially terrified state where I felt like I was incorrect and anything I said would be incorrect. And then also was in this environment. Down in the South, things are different. I am an outsider, philosophically, religiously, politically, in a lot of rooms. So I found myself very encouraged to just say nothing and to be as much of a non-person as possible. And then otherwise to try to manage the impression I was making on others by, you guessed it, working harder and harder and harder all the time. If my personality isn't acceptable to you and my beliefs upset you, then at least maybe I can be usable enough that you'll see that I have some value. Again, this is how I got through childhood. And this is what my mind returns to now as an adult, especially after that return to family abuse, which is all to say, it was a very difficult year socially, and I mostly was alone. I did have some luck beginning to make some friendships and like a small community network at my last park, and then I had to move. But I was making some small moves that at least were an improvement on the last few years of complete and total isolation. And I did have some good fortune meeting people who had similar beliefs as me in an unexpected place. So, as far as challenges go, at least there were some positive social movements. They just haven't been lasting. They've not been the thing I've been looking for. They haven't been these kind of pots of gold findings as one might hope. And I've met a few people where I thought maybe they were like, oh, okay, this is the person who's supposed to be my new best friend. Got it. Okay. This is the person who's kind of like offering me, I don't want to say a new family experience, but they have like a maternal aspect to them and are bringing me in a little bit. And then, with time, you find out, no, not so much. And that's okay. I haven't put a ton of pressure on it or a ton of effort. I have tried to show up and be more consistent this year with people, but it is challenging when you're not seeing yourself still as a whole person, when a lot of your parts are still offline because they've been deemed unsafe or somehow just less prioritized. And none of this has helped me with woo-covery, our next topic. We've moved through a few of them now that I've maybe forgotten to explicitly announce, but woo-covery, if you don't know, I am a pretty deeply spiritual person, and it is a big part of why I live out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, why I'm always in nature, and why I'm somewhat sane sometimes with my trauma recovery. Unfortunately, when you are in a state of just trying to get by, when you're moving all the time, your life is very kinetic and on a bit of an autopilot mode. If you're me, and I think most people, you do lose access to that spiritual thing, that connection to something bigger. This year, I've had a lot less synchronicities. I've had a lot less of this sense of this cord being there that I can kind of like connect to and suspend myself with above the nonsense of life. There's been a bit less faith in things working out, while at the same time knowing that even if they don't work out, that's kind of what's intended. So it's a weird back and forth. I guess it's a continuation of my faith, but maybe a less manic or like white lighty view of it. Like, yeah, there is a thing, there is some kind of purpose and guidance in life, and you can't see what events mean until afterwards. And also, none of that means that those events are going to feel good. I guess that's what I've come down to. Truly, the realization that suffering is all a part of this thing. And although it's part of the plan and it's for ultimate good, it still sucks. And so, kind of being awash in a period of everything sucking, it's made me not lose faith or lose interest in the spiritual, but to kind of be like a little stankier towards it, I guess. Even at the times that I've been able to access this thing, I've been a bit like displeased with the way that it has kicked me around for a bit, if that makes sense. Like, thanks for the tough love. And also, could we make it easier love for a while or just at some point? There have also been some deeply spiritual times this year, though, like after the wildfire, when everything kind of worked out in a way, in one of the most traumatic ways you could imagine. But I did end up in a new place, meeting new people. I did not return back home. There was a lot of reasons that it felt like higher powers at work. And similarly, getting to this new place that I'm at now was very much not of my doing. And I didn't even try, honestly, as the time was coming up and I knew I needed to find a new park to live at. I didn't go looking. I had some kind of faith that it would work itself out and some knowledge that the more I try to control those things, just the more upsetting it is for me. So I let go of the steering wheel, dropped the reins, and this new place kind of fell into my lap. It just showed up, and I had some sense that it would. So it's been a back and forth year with trying to figure out what to have faith in, and to tie that back to parts and socializing. That has been a big part of that topic as well. When are people going to start showing up in my life that I'm supposed to know? Because for quite a while, it has felt like I've only been delivered people who are supposed to teach me lessons about what I've been doing wrong. And I've certainly been waiting for any kind of lesson about what I can do right, about new community or people who are correct for my next stages of existing. Like I said, there's been a few times where I meet somebody and I'm like, okay, I think this is it. This is some kind of fated encounter. And then I find out time and time again, maybe, but it's a fated encounter to keep teaching you, like I said, what is not being done correctly, where boundaries still need to lie, things like that. I've really had a lot of misgivings for the last many years now coming out of any kind of abusive situation. I think that that's pretty straightforward. It has been a huge obstacle to forming any relationships of any kind of depth or vulnerability. Through some happenstantial meetings, I have had some kind of reparations in my relationship programming, I would say. There were some young camp hosts that I met at the park I accidentally wound up at after the wildfire, who felt like immediate friends. We bonded right away and we're having a great time going out sailing together and stuff. Then they moved to Utah a week later. From that connection, though, I started working for the woman that I was house cleaning for, and she was an absolute delight. Still is. I'm driving down there once in a while to keep helping her. I love that job. Uh, she has been a strange kind of beacon of hope in inviting me to come out and grab drinks with her and her, much older friends, inviting me for holidays in case I have nowhere else to go, things like that. It's been nice just to have another sort of maternal figure around. I got along well with quite a few of the lady rangers at the last park that I was at. I called it Alt Girl Park because it was all these like kind of punky, like hipster girls running the place, except for, the males who had all of the highest positions. Hmm. Um, and I've had some relationships from the past few years kind of kick back around that had been on pause or just had kind of faded out. So it's been really nice to reconnect with some people, including a motherfucker down in Australia that I'm back on very regular speaking terms with. And she's kind of another fake mom of mine, actually. Most significantly, and perhaps the greatest surprise that could have possibly come from this year or any year, is the fact that my oldest brother reached out to me a few weeks ago out of the blue and wants to have a relationship. He apologized for many things. Reminder, this oldest brother was the heroin addict for like 12 years. It got clean probably about 10 years ago and has been better in that regard since, but has still had, the underlying trauma that caused the addiction in the first place that was not dealt with. So to say he was still a motherfucking terror interpersonally would be accurate. So he and I have never really had a relationship. We haven't spoken in about 3.5 years when he last yelled 2 inches away from my face, and I never really anticipated I would ever have any relationship with him again. He's also really at the nucleus of many of the problems that I've had with other members of my family, like my other brother and my mother, because he was driving a lot of that conflict. So, all of this kind of shitty detail to say, yeah, he reached out and just wanted to chat and to start forging a relationship together, which, on the one hand, take it slow, be careful, don't believe anything that seems too lofty is true. And on the other hand, is this some sort of spontaneous healing that's taking place? Or maybe a door nudging open at least a little bit that could lead to some healing for everyone involved? It has eased a lot of my misgivings and I guess really helped me to feel like maybe this trauma recovery journey that I set out on wasn't such a bad idea after all, even though it has led to many years of incredible trials and tribulations, let's say that much, of being estranged from my family for talking about the family trauma. And now one of the people who was really the driver of that family trauma maybe seems to be coming around and understanding his part in things. Maybe. I also need to mention I'm an aunt as of a couple of days ago. I think that's one of the reasons that he reached out. My oldest brother has become a father, and I have a lot of thoughts about that, a lot of fears about that, and also see some enormous possibility in that. I'm not going to be able to prevent his daughter from obtaining CPTSD, and I would guess that that is the likely outcome for her. But at least maybe there's some way that I can be a positive voice in my brother's ear to help balance some of it out. Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to be too grandiose with my thoughts about this, but perhaps there is some reason that we have reconnected right when he has had this massive life change. As suggested by my traumatized motherfucker friend in Australia, some part of him does realize that I have been correct and does see some value in the things that I've been speaking. Maybe not. All I know is we are not our parents. This is an opportunity for him to, in some ways, break some of the generational trauma chain. And I'm not a parent here, but I do hope that I can contribute to kind of the family evolution away from being as horrible as we previously were. We're not them. And I hope that he approaches fatherhood with that mentality. And as we start to wrap this episode up with maybe the second biggest announcement of the whole thing, I need to acknowledge that although we are not them, I do recognize that we still have the abusers within us. Me too. Not only my brother, but it's one of the reasons that I also keep myself hidden away from everybody and have been really isolated these past many years. When I'm in a survival mode, when things are stressful, when I feel overburdened and like I'm the only person holding everything together and don't have support otherwise, that's when I get pretty awful, I would say. I become a much more reduced version of self. I'm very hardened. I treat people like they're inconveniences. I'm not conscious enough of my words and the way that they can impact others. And honestly, I still would consider myself to be in Abusers Anonymous, like recovering from the trends that were learned from our family members and trying not to pass them on, even to Margus Bargus over here. I notice the days that I'm doing the worst because he's acting like it, because his demeanor changes and I can tell he's tense and uncomfortable around me because it's like having a raging hurricane inside of me. Like everything inside is so intense and stormy that even if I'm not doing or saying anything that could be considered uncouth, he's still picking up on that energy and reflecting back to me that I'm not being my best self. And that is one of the reasons that I have stayed away from people. I felt like I've needed to get this under control, to have this resolved before I could have good relationships or relationships that are worth having. And now I'm realizing, as I've known all along, but it's still difficult to apply to my own life. I can't wait for all of these things to go away or improve, because the way for them to improve is to have relationships and to work on the things. Without the relationships, I've just been stuck in place, sometimes seeing the things that I do incorrectly, such as with Marcus Vargas, but not having the tools, the material to move through, or the real inspiration to do all of the work without having the relationships that are kind of getting fucked up by needing to do the work. It has been a real messed up paradox to come to terms with, and it's really called me to question the best way to be responsible in relationships. I'm now realizing that relationships are absolutely necessary, even though I don't necessarily feel ready to do them. And in other ways, feel like I can't possibly continue existing much longer without doing them, because life has been a real fucking bore and I have been stalled out rather than actually living and working through the issues. And this brings us to our final topic of today: dating in dystopia. I started dipping a toe back into romantics, y'all. It's been real recent. In the beginning of October, my romantic world was accidentally reawakened. And since then, I decided I probably need to keep those lights on. So, although it goes against all of my best judgments, I have been trying to date again. I have met a few guys in person. It's what started this whole reawakening experience. They came to me, and then after that, I have rejoined the motherfucking apps, which, yeah, I mean, we all know. And I have to say that it has been completely revolutionary for the way I've been dealing with myself. Um, After these years of everything being really out of my control and feeling very painful trying to deal with family members without any progress, I was really pulling away from life experience and just trying to get by while feeling the least amount possible. And then once you start dating again, that's not possible anymore. And it's forced me to go back to my practice of reframing all of my perspectives and seeing what's a bunch of my own dumb fucking bullshit when I'm assessing outward events. Returning to dating has been both excruciating. It has reminded me of where my deepest wounds lie and some of my deepest insecurities and worst relationship behaviors. It has brought back some of my attachment issues that I wasn't realizing I was still dealing with. It has reminded me of my very fragile self-esteem and why I am so rejection sensitive in these last few years. In a lot of ways, it's been absolutely painful and horrible. And in a lot of ways, that's exactly what I've needed. Unfortunately, or maybe realistically, my framework for life, the way that I sort of experience it, is through pain and then having to recalibrate my thoughts due to that pain. And this has been a return to that practice. It's been a reminder of humanity. I think for a number of years here, I've been Perhaps sitting on a bit of a high horse, saying, I don't need relationships. Relationships are where all of the trouble comes from in being a human. I am just not going to do that. I will be self supporting, and in that way, I will be the most effective, least bullshitty human possible. None of that is correct. Humans do need relationships. We do need love. There are reasons that we're all striving for these things. And without them, we're stuck. We're very reduced, diminished versions of ourselves that can't grow or progress. So through dating in dystopia, I'm being reminded of the point of being alive and the feelings of being alive. I guess I'm saying I found a lot more compassion for the human species and myself, and have started kind of remembering the things that I want after years of what has just been continual self-deprivation, asceticism, and calling it morality. To pull this episode back to the beginning, I do expect to be talking about these topics as this year goes on. I failed at moving along in 2025 for a lot of reasons, but I'm trying to prioritize changes to make this thing work in 2026. I am just doing things differently in my own life, like meeting people and dealing with the trauma of human relating. It's been a hard year. It's been a weird year. It's been a year with a lot of setbacks and then some stumblings forwards again. I guess I'm hoping that 2026 proceeds somewhat similarly, but also with the benefit of feeling again for the first time in a long time. I don't anticipate that it's going to be an easy year coming up, but I do anticipate that at least it will be different than the ones I've been having. At least I'm no longer in an autopilot survival mode. Thanks for being here. Thank you for holding tight while I've been pretty AWOL this year, dealing with way too many other things. I'll see you in 2026. Let's keep trying to move along, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers, y'all. Take care out there. Hail the new year, and let's see what happens in this solar spin, huh? Cheers.